quite an issue with these approaches because it takes more time, meaning it takes more money. And you also mentioned that you produce these guidelines for research and education. I wonder whether you also touched on this topic in terms of providing guidelines for research agencies that then distribute money to researchers. Because usually you don't quite fit into these evaluation panels, which are typically disciplinary, but sustainability science doesn't quite fit in these. So that's one thing. And then the other is, again, whether there are some guidelines, again, for funding agencies, because it was mentioned that new ways of communicating research are needed. So are there any recommendations for these funding agencies to also promote these ways, like funding blogs or social media management? Because you get money for publishing research articles, but you don't really get funding for these things, or they are not as highlighted as the scientific outcomes. So these are two questions.
Okay. With regards to your first question, yes, for instance, in the policy guidelines that we formulated and that are accessible online, we explicitly addressed also the funding sector. And there are other publications. One has been published in Germany where it addresses explicitly, and it's, I don't know the exact title, it's about policy relevant sustainability science or something like that. And if you address me, I can forward the link to you. This is explicitly also addressing the three groups with recommendations to the policy level, the funding institutions and the researchers itself. So there is something already there. With regard to the communication thing, it's a little bit more difficult, and I can only speak there for Germany. I mean, in general, there has been during the last years, and this is because I teach also a master course on science communication, there is some kind of many initiatives that can be seen with regard to being aware of the fact that the science communication changed over the years. I mean, in the 70s we had programs that were called Public Understanding of Science, but that were only based on a deficit model that says, well, the public doesn't know about science, we have to convince them that science is important and so forth, but there's no feedback, there's really some kind of unidirectional communication, and that has changed to more dialogue-based communication, and there are some also important foundations and institutions in Germany, for instance, to run programs for where you can apply for funding in these spheres, where they also give prizes every year for the best. I think one is explicitly called Communicator Prize, so to say, but that's not related to sustainability at all. That's about general scientific communication, so to say. But as I said, the trend, or so to say, the opening up phenomenon is also to be seen in this area where there's a change during the last years. As I said, getting away from the deficit model where we as the sages on the stage, so to say, pray the wisdom and everybody else has to just digest, like passive amoeba or something like that, to a more dialogical model of science. And this is happening also with regard, for instance, if you look at how projects are evaluated. You might have heard maybe of some kind of, I heard it first in Finland, where they really made use of, when they evaluated the outcomes of a research, that they don't have the usual peer review, so the experts in that disciplines, for instance, like you have in scientific journals, but they talk about extended peer reviews. So they are inviting also experts in this field of actions, like I said before, that can be non-academics, but experts on another indigenous basis or whatever you would like to call it, and they evaluate this kind of projects from their perspective, so that you have different views on the research outcome. That makes it also valuable, or that also gives a different way of evaluating things, and not only, for instance, the internal science communication, where you have the impact factors, where sometimes, to be honest, you really don't know where these numbers come from, because, as you know, the impact factors, you have to buy them. There is some private institution that sells the calculations to the journal, and well, the calculation basis is also something that can be discussed, but that would lead too far. there's, as I said, some dysfunctioning also within the scientific sector itself. But with regard to the publications or so, or even with regard to the policy guidelines, there's one thing, let me add one more. What I see is very problematic, for instance, if I want to, as a European or a researcher based in Germany or in Europe, it's very difficult, for instance, to find specific programs that allow me to build this bridge towards this white spots on the landmark. I mean, in Germany, we have at the moment some kind of priority area that's Africa as a whole. But of course, the focus is again on the richer African countries that are already doing well, so to say, not the poorer ones. So I worked together with Ethiopia the last years, one of the poorer, but also going up countries there. And it's very difficult to find programs or whatever kind of ways that are so open that the programs are not related to specific areas or specific countries. To really foster this kind of north-south collaboration, or even more difficult, this north-south-south collaboration, so even to have partners from, at the same time, let's say Latin America and Africa together with you in one research project. It's hardly impossible to do. And this is something I would like to see, at least to have these target areas more open to allow researchers who are interested and already have contacts there to really strengthen these bridges.
Okay, so it is a very short question requiring short answer.
Okay. Yeah, just short one. First, congratulations on your achievements. I'm really enjoying that, Maika. I'm really jealous about your having not just one sustainable course or program, but University of Sustainability. That's great. The question is about, I like your idea of extending the concept of planetary boundaries from the environmental domain to social and economic. And there are definitely many phenomena that are suitable for it, like sustainability pensions or sustainability national debt, and many others. So my question is how far you are in that, or how serious you are about elaborating that concept into other domains?
Well, we have, so to say, the advantage that we are a small or medium-sized university, because there the silos of the different disciplines may be not that strong than in bigger universities, so that we really have easier access to colleagues in other faculties to really find common ground. Because there's also still in our university, it's slowly shifting. There's some kind of, I don't know if I can translate it, there's some kind of individual treaties of the professors with the rectors, target agreements or something like that. You have it here as well, I guess so. And in these target agreements of the professors with the university heads, usually you have the usual numbers that they have to show up specific funding in their disciplines and publications in their discipline with the high impact factors. So they're not rewarded at all if they do some kind of work that's beside or below their own discipline. So that really makes it hard to cooperate. But as I said, this thing is going to change, and even our president rethinks of how he could make a shift in this reward system for the individual researchers, that it opens up to cross-boundary, cross-faculty idea development, because this is not rewarded, of course. If you think about colleagues from the economy, how can we find common ground? How can we find different points of entry? This is something that nobody afterwards evaluates in a positive way, but as I said, even in our university, the ways are slowly shifting into this direction. That's promising.
Thank you once again.